Most traders assume that your trading psychology is about fixing yourself. And unfortunately, most of the time it's always unclear, it's impossible to apply, and it ignores the real cause underneath the surface. Now, there are actually three layers of psychology, and most traders focus on one. So let's break down each of those three in this video. So this is what the average week used to look like for me in my trading journey. So what I would do is I'd start each week pretty excited, as most traders do. But then as I continue to make loads of mistakes that I know I shouldn't do, things like not following my plan, not holding trades to target, FOMOing in too early, and various other mistakes that I'm sure you've had 10 times over. And then as that happened, my mood naturally went from excitement more towards the kind of depression end of the spectrum. And so by Friday, I was already feeling pretty low because I'd broken all the promises to myself and to my plan. And it just felt like I hadn't made any progress. And normally my week was coming out negative as well, which wasn't helping me at all either. And then what would happen at that point was really what was keeping me stuck, because then what I would spend my time doing is I would go and I would be stuffing my brain full of trading content about, how I can fix this problem, this problem, this problem. And I would basically just watch so much content until eventually this depression flipped back into excitement again. Now, this is important to understand because it was this flip that I thought was me improving. This is the key. I thought I was improving because I was feeling better, but this was not improving. What this was it was me essentially self-medicating myself out of facing the actual problem. So what I should have been doing is facing the problem and understanding why I was breaking all of the promises to myself instead of trying to make myself feel better. And this is the key. Most traders are addicted to the idea of improving rather than the actual feeling of improving itself. But over time, what happened is as my bad behaviors went down and down and down, they didn't go down this smoothly. As they went down and down and down, I expected my results, my actual trading performance to naturally go up and up and up and up, which it didn't. It went from kind of slightly losing to around about break even. I'd have these up periods and then down periods, but the average is that I would never really make any money. It would just be break even, normally a little bit negative after costs, etc. And so I came to the conclusion that 90% of psychology problems are actually just system problems in disguise. Now, most of the time, you're going to have both problems. You're going to have psychological problems because we're not robots. But the system problems are normally the better use of time to focus on. The reason for this is because that is where most of the results are coming from. It's better to have a great system with poor execution than a bad system with great execution. That's just the general rule of thumb. And so just some simple sentences here. You can meditate all you want, but if the system is unclear, you will hesitate. If there's no story, you will panic when things change. If there's no reason to hold, you are going to exit early. And if the market is random, which it will feel random if your results are sideways, break even, or slightly losing, you're going to burn out emotionally. We're human beings. It's difficult to trade, and it's going to be even more difficult if there's no end in sight. It just always feels like you're losing. And also, if you track too many markets, you will feel chaotic. So a simpler way to break this down is when you are trading a system, the type of system that you pick is going to depend on your personality. And the type of system that you pick is also going to influence which trading psychology problems you are most likely to experience. This is good because it means we can reverse engineer, okay, what's my personality type? For example, I used to find it really difficult to hold my trades to target. And so over time, I've learned ways to do things with my system or pick systems that are working to my personality a little bit. And so it all comes down to this right here. Everyone's looking for confidence. If you had 100% confidence that Microsoft was going to go from $100 to $500 in the next 3 months, you'd have zero problem holding that trade. Zero. You'd have no problem with your position sizing, hesitation, nothing. You had 100% confidence, you had a crystal ball, you'd be fine. And so this is really the key because it means that when we are faced with uncertainty, which is what the markets give us a huge old dose of, when we're dealing with uncertainty, the confidence goes. And the problem is that even if you feel like you're going to have a high amount of confidence, most trading systems don't give that to you. Let's look at where confidence comes from with each system. If we look at a technical only trader, so this is where I spent most of my career up until a couple of years ago, the only real confidence you can get is from history, basically historical data. Now, back tests where you go back and test 100, 200, 300 or more results of your strategy in the past, or forward tests where you're maybe testing it on a demo for 20, 30, 40 trades or more. But I'm classifying both of these as historical because even a forward test, you're not judging the performance until it's already happened and you're looking backwards. They're basically just two different versions of the same thing. Now, one reason that this is great is because it can give you a little bit of an indication about how this particular strategy forms in a particular environment. Like if I'm testing a technical system and I'm testing it in a nice training environment, it gives me an idea of, okay, this is working pretty well and these are the stats for this particular environment. And so what comes from this is confidence. Now, the problem is that as soon as the system stops working or stops working as well as it should, my confidence in those backtests goes down dramatically. And the longer it goes on, the less confidence I have, and I flip right back over to uncertainty. When this happens, this is the exact same thing as having no backtest or forward test whatsoever. And the problem is that most technical traders get trapped in this part because they have no adaptability. They don't adapt to when things change, and market conditions do change. Like there are loads of examples. If you go back to any chart, I'll just go to the S&P 500 as an example here. The strategies that worked really well during this period are going to be different than the ones that performed excellently during this period. And so it's the same thing. Even if we go back here, the strategy that worked well during this is going to be different than the one that worked well during here. It's going to be a very simple example with the S&P 500. But if you look at something like FX, like Euro USD, it's going to be even more obvious because the market will go through so many different cycles and phases. You'll go through periods where it goes up, consolidates, down, and it's always kind of up and down within these different kind of wonky looking ranges like that. And so the trouble here is that if you can't adapt, if you have no way to predict what's going on, then you, by definition, are always on the back foot a little bit. Doesn't mean it's not possible. No, it absolutely is possible. It's just a little bit different. And in my opinion, in my experience, it's just not as effective as what a professional does, which is why I've moved over to a more professional approach. Now, one of the main differences in terms of the actual strategy, there are others in terms of like the types of execution that they are using and things like that. But the biggest difference is that they are also using historical data, which is the similarity. The types of data they can look at is often different, but they're also adding in a predictive element to what they're doing as well. And really, when I talk about prediction, it isn't some magical, woo-woo crazy concept. It's basically just a fancy term for selecting the right environment. What is environment selection? Well, the easiest way to understand it is if I've tested a technical system and I know that it's a technical system built for trends, right? And I know that it works really well in a trending environment. That means that most likely its worst case scenario, meaning the environment that it doesn't work well in, is going to be something like this, where it's moving sideways. Obviously, trend systems work well in trend environments and sideways systems work well in sideways environments. That's obvious. But the key is that the better use of time, the better use and spend of your time, is that going to be on finding the perfect technical set of rules to maximize every tiny bit out of that trend when it comes? Or is it going to be from just getting good at identifying, okay, when is this market going to be trending versus not? Or if I'm just picking out of all the markets, which market is most likely to trend, which market is most likely to be aligned with what my system works well in? This is the part that most people miss, and it's where a lot of technical traders get kind of stumped because they spend all of their time building these complex technical rules, smart money, SMC, fair value gap, liquidity, order block, moving average crossover, RSI, Williams percent range, yada, 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 market structure, pullback, break, retest, port resistance, whatever. All of these things are fine. They're good for timing. They're good timing tools. Many of them I've used in the past extensively. But the best return on time is going to be, okay, well, what if I just got really good at identifying which environment it works well in and then spotting that environment ahead of time? That's really one of the key differences between a technical only trader and a more professional styled trader. It's not magic. It's not woo woo. They don't have crazy advantages over you. They do have some depending on the style and whatnot, but it's often just coming down to this, which actually makes the game a lot simpler to understand. And so there are many ways to do this, of course. That's not the topic of this video, but the most important thing to understand is the environment selection is key. If you haven't got a way to identify the environment, you are reacting, which means that you're going to chip away with more little losses more frequently when these transition periods come about. And by transition periods, I mean when we go from a sideways market to a trending market, or a trending market to a sideways market. And so the key thing is, let's just assume that we know all of this stuff. What about when it comes to actually fixing our trading psychology? Because this is another area where I think people just get things really, really wrong. Most people think, when they think of psychology, they think, okay, I need to meditate. I need to do deep breathing and all of these sorts of things. And these things I am a big fan of. I think that they're amazing. They've helped me in my life in so many ways. But these things are harder to do. I find that the best way is to focus on things that are practical. So those down there would be examples of what I would call like an internal factor. But the external factors are going to be the easiest to control. And this is split into two different categories. Number one is going to be making the bad things harder and good things easy. Second one is going to be fixing the addictive brain. So the first one is simple, right? Let's just say that you can't hold your trades to target. And this is one of the big problems that I had in my journey. I was like, well, look, I just can't seem to fix this problem. Like everything that I do doesn't work. So what am I supposed to do? And really, I over time realized that I was staring at the charts while I was in positions, and therefore I was super emotional, hyper emotional, and I'd just panic and pull my position out. And this came from two different things. The first one, before we even get into the psychological stuff, is I had very low confidence because I didn't have enough conviction in what I was doing. I was just focusing and relying on a pattern that kind of worked sometimes, didn't work other times. That's very difficult to truly remain focused and have a high level of confidence on, because things are always changing, things are always uncertain, and you have no real evidence in front of you besides a back test which is proving to not work, that things are going to play out for you in the way that you want. And so in that case, I realized, okay, well, let me just make it difficult for me to watch the charts when I'm in a trade. And so each week I kind of scale up the difficulty because it was such a big problem for me, to the point where I had to just leave my house, leave my phone at home. At the time I had like an iPod Shuffle. I don't even know if they still make those anymore. I doubt it. I'd go to the gym, I'd meet friends, I'd go for a walk, I'd do anything else. Or well, just be at my job, depending on what the time was. But basically you're making it harder in your environment to do things that you know you shouldn't be doing. The equivalent in everyday life would be if you found it really hard to stop playing video games, just take the cable out of your console or whatever you used, put the console in one room and a cupboard somewhere difficult to get, a cable in another room, and then when you want to play video games, it's going to be like, oh, can't be bothered setting it all up though. So you're almost tricking your own brain into making it more difficult to do the things that you know you shouldn't do. Pretty simple. And then vice versa, the complete opposite for when something should be done, make it really easy to do. If you can do any work up front, that means it's just a click of a button beforehand. Anything you can do to make your life easy, do that, because it takes the mental load off, and willpower is limited. Next thing is something that I found extremely effective, and it's fixing the addictive brain. So what does that mean? Well, look, we all have brains, obviously, and we all have things that what I'd call weaknesses, right? So things that put us away from being in control of our lives. So for some people, maybe that's alcohol. Other people, maybe that's video games. Other people, maybe it's ice cream. Other people, maybe it's, I don't know, gambling. The list goes on and on and on. We basically have vices that at any one time are pulling us away. And really, it comes down to understanding the difference between, let's just say, an alcoholic versus non-alcoholic. Now, the thought for both of these people is, maybe I could have a drink. That's going to be the same for both sets of people. But the difference is that the alcoholic, as soon as that thought comes in their brain, almost uncontrollably, before they even have a chance to really consider it, they're already in the fridge getting a beer or going to the pub or doing whatever they're doing, right? And so this is an example of having low control. Low control equals high compulsion. And really the goal when we're doing anything with trading psychology is to basically switch states from a state of high compulsion to a state of high control. Now, the problem is it really all comes down to the dopamine system in your head. Now, you don't need to be a neuroscientist to understand this. It's really, really simple. Dopamine is one of the reward mechanisms in the brain, right? Meaning dopamine rises as we move towards something, as we try and obtain something. And the problem is if you imagine a drug addict, right? The more drugs they do, they need more and more of that drug to get the same high. It's the exact same thing with day-to-day things in your life. If you have person A, whose day-to-day looks like eat a whole tub of ice cream, play video games, masturbate all day, gamble, drink alcohol, etc. If we were to compare that sort of person to person B, and these are just extreme ends of the spectrum, who eats well, exercises, doesn't drink, etc. Which of these people do you think is going to find it easier to do the tasks that they know they should do? Probably this person. There are many reasons for this. Like obviously if someone's not eating well, they're not thinking at the same level of clarity, various things like that. But just that all aside, these people have a higher dopamine sensitivity. Why? Because all of these activities are designed to make your brain flood with pleasure chemicals, not just dopamine, but many, many chemicals, right? And just like a drug addict, the more you feed this with quick fixes, instant gratification, the easier it is to keep doing more of the same, and the harder it is to move over to doing something that you know you should do, but you don't do. And so this is really the key, because just like an addict, what we really want to do is we want to go from a state of high addiction to a state of low addiction. And one of the simplest ways to see this, if you don't believe this, do this for 24 hours and then come back to this video or send me a message or something and just tell me what you think about this. Do 24 hours where you do no technology whatsoever. Maybe a day on the weekend when you're not at work, go see friends, do anything else. Ideally, don't go out and get completely smash drunk as well. That's probably, it's not really gonna help. It's going to defeat the point. But just try and have a 24-hour period where from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you just don't look at any technology. Specifically, the big one is going to be no social media. You know, Netflix is better than social media, but if you can do no technology, you'll notice the effects a lot more. So just do no technology, no alcohol. If you do that, when you wake up the day after, you are going to be shocked at how clear your mind feels. It is night and day. And when you feel that, that's going to give you the motivation to be like, oh, wow, I can see the effect that this has. And then you're going to be more open to restructuring the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you have to become a monk and do all of this sort of stuff and get it all perfect. It's about, look, where you can, being the type of person who tries to opt for delayed gratification in the other areas of your life. Don't just try to be a better trader, because your personal life will seep in to your trading life. If every other part of your life is a mess and then you're trying to be this really organized trader, that's not going to work. You need to have things together. You need to have your mind in the game and your mind switched on. And really what happens is when you do this, what you're doing is just like an addict removing that drug from their system, their sensitivity to the drug comes up. And all of the tasks that you know you should be doing, eating well, exercising, these become more appealing. They become easier to do. You actually end up wanting to do them because these things release dopamine and other chemicals in a much slower, more sustainable way. And if you're more sensitive to that, that means you're going to enjoy that more and more and more. And the more you can align yourself with person B, it's not just about, oh, everything else is getting easier in my life. It's when these thoughts come in, your level of control goes up, because as the addiction side of your brain goes down, you're not feeling as compelled towards that same drug again. And so you're going to have a little bit more control, even if it's just a split second, to be like, well, wait a second, I'm not going to have that drink of alcohol, or I'm not going to do that trading behavior. I'm not going to take my trade out early. I'm not going to do that, because your mind is quieter. And if you compound this with the internal exercises like meditating, things like deep breathing, yoga in some cases, if it's heavy on breathing as well, these things are all going to compound and allow you to do the best that you can. But none of this is going to work unless you have a system that actually works, a system that makes sense, a system that is grounded in reality. And so, as I said before, it all comes down to picking the environment. Now, if you would like to see me picking the environment in the stock market specifically week on week, then check out the link for Inside Alpha in the description box below. Watch the video there. I'll explain it in a little bit more detail. But basically, it's my exact watch list every single week of all of the stocks that have gone through my professional process to predict which ones are likely to go up and which ones are likely to go down. And then I have a simple two-step entry trigger to take advantage of that throughout the week. Makes my job very, very simple. And if you just want to see me doing that week on week, then you're more than welcome to go and check that out. But guys, the main premise of this is simple. We want to move as much as possible from uncertainty into confidence, and we want to give ourselves as much mental control as possible by using a blend of external and internal factors together. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be a saint, but having a blend of those two is going to be really important. Watch this video up here next on screen, as I'm sure it's going to really help you. Take care, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.